Hi, I'm Samantha Murray,
Hi, I'm Courtney Sembler.
and this is CX Signals.
This week on CX Signals, I'm sitting down with someone who has built one of the most sophisticated post-sale CX operations in enterprise SaaS. Mary Iapicca is the VP of Customer Experience at ZoomInfo, where she oversees 7 functions: onboarding, technical implementation, customer education, community, customer success, delivery, and CX operations, across a team of over 250 people. And she didn't inherit that scope. She built it one function at a time over 4 years, starting as the director of onboarding and growing from there. In this conversation, we get into what it actually takes to design and execute a segmented onboarding transformation at scale, the kind that runs 1,500 new projects a month, and how moving to a more digital model unlocked data and personalization capabilities that a fully human-led motion simply can't match. We also get into Mary's take on career progression in CX, and she says something that I think a lot of leaders in our space need to hear, that you don't need to pitch your way into expanded scope. You just need to be the name that comes up in rooms when a decision needs to be made. That philosophy personally resonates with me, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this episode. Let's get into it. Mary, welcome to CX Signals.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat with you.
Super excited to have this conversation. I think your work at ZoomInfo has been incredibly interesting, particularly to me with my background in go-to-market and CX. And I know that that's something that's really interesting to you as well. I've seen a lot of your LinkedIn posts where you chat about this. So one of the things that I found particularly interesting when I was reviewing your background is this intersection of like customer experience and customer ed, operations, and now this go-to-market work, especially because ZoomInfo is a company that exists in the sort of go-to-market intelligence realm, right? So before we get into the transformation your team has led there, can you give us a quick snapshot of your journey and what drew you to this type of work in CX?
Yeah, great place to start. Obviously, at ZoomInfo, I've touched almost every part of the post-sale motion, onboarding, implementation, operations, customer enablement, and that has all come from different parts of my background professionally and personally. I actually came out of college with a degree in education, high school English. Yep, that's an interesting place to start and to live. Not really a Romeo and Juliet every year kind of gal. Great story, but don't want to teach it every year.
Sure.
I moved into a psychology space. I did my master's in psychology and did guidance counseling for a little while. Wanted to get into like the behavioral therapist portion of what you do in schools. And I think like that was the draw to education. And that's like the connection between customer education. And it's just a passion that I've always had for teaching, for educating, for wanting to help the like light bulb go off and seeing the light bulb moment, I think is even more fun. When I stepped into more of a corporate space, I did executive assistant for a little while. I worked in social media analytics for a little while, and it was always that light bulb going off that like triggered the joy and excitement in your day job, or like whatever joy and excitement you can get from your day job, right?
Right.
Whatever that looks like. And I really like helping people understand what that next step is, seeing a little bit of success. It was the same thing in a high school setting with kids, like seeing that light bulb go off. It was the same in executive assistant when I was working there. I worked in financial aid for a little while. It's always those first time learning experience that really got me excited. And then when I stepped into that corporate space where it's like you can keep making that experience happen every single time they learn something new, right? Like every time you learn a technology, there's so many possibilities of what you can do with that piece of technology, and you can't do them all right away. If you try, you're going to get overloaded. I call it cognitive overload, and you're just going to stop learning. And so like it's almost like the world we're in now with micro learning, right? Like if we just give a little bit and you see that light bulb go off and then a little bit more and it goes like they just keep going off for me and I just keep getting excited about the work that I'm doing. And so CX just gave me that space to be able to do that and to see that in the corporate setting.
What was your transition like from teacher to going into sort of the corporate world, especially in tech? Did you transition straight into tech, or was there sort of like an in between after you left teaching?
It was straight from teaching to tech. And the biggest change was like the terminology, right? Like I was like, oh, let's make a PowerPoint in education. I was like, oh, have you made that deck? I'm like, what's a deck? What are you talking about? Like all the acronyms that come with it.
Honestly, it's so crazy. When you actually think about it, the amount of acronyms and the amount of like weird names that we have for things in tech, it's a little strange.
Yeah, that was honestly the biggest changeover. And I was just like, oh, I understand what you want. Like there were small culture shifts, I feel like, here and there. But like you run into the same things, right? Like the politics in a school, what you can and can't do. Like that's in a corporate setting as well.
Right.
Certainly like pay changes and things like that are a little bit different and HR is a little different, but like it was really just the terminology. But yeah, I think in general, that it's still a work setting. It's still a that remains the same. And being professional in those settings, who you're communicating with might be different, like students or parents versus people that are paying for a service is a little bit different. But
Sure.
overall,
The fundamentals are the same, and I'm sure the teaching background gave you a lot of insight into the like behavioral side of learning, which I'm sure has helped as you've grown your career on the CX side. And I see that you've taken on the customer education team at ZoomInfo, which I know we'll get into a little bit later.
yes.
First, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about your journey specifically in like growing these teams. So I think if I recall correctly, you started when you made the shift into sort of like the customer success realm. It was initially under the umbrella of like implementation and onboarding, if I'm not mistaken. So like me through the transition from starting in that area of expertise and then scaling and growing into a place where now you're overseeing 7 different functions at ZoomInfo.
Yeah, it was a very interesting transition. I also, I would say I started in corporate like a little bit later in my professional career. I had worked in education for a while and I worked in higher ed for a little while. I wouldn't, it's still a nonprofit, not exactly corporate. So I had been doing that as the director of admissions at a college for a while in financial aid. And then I stepped into an IC role as an onboarding manager. And I was, back in the saddle teaching, basically. You're just teaching people how to use a technology. And you talk about like using your educational foundation and like theories, like that's what I did. We didn't have an onboarding team. We had the onboarding role. And you kind of like onboard people however you want it. Like ask them what they want to do, figure out how to navigate through the platform. And I was really able to take my teaching background and make a curriculum for an essentials feature session, if you will. And so I think I enjoyed that because I knew how to teach, but I also got to develop the curriculum, which was really cool. At that org, like they weren't really growing the organization necessarily. And so I kind of went to seek out what was next. And I went back to education, but in the ed tech space. For some reason, I was missing the mission driven part of working in education. And I hadn't quite learned yet that, and this is my personal perspective, I think mission driven organizations are really great. But I want to do that outside of my 9 to 5, right? Like I'm okay with working at a company that is selling a software, right? Like that isn't necessarily mission driven. And so I went back to that mission driven space, worked in ed tech for a while, worked with colleges and universities again, started working in customer success as a whole, not just onboarding. So starting to expand that, worked in customer marketing, customer education again at a smaller org that was maturing in that function. And like I started to realize that it wasn't the mission of the business that I enjoyed, but the growth that part of the department was experiencing and how you can influence that and build that that I thought was really, really interesting. So I was there for a decent amount of time. They saw a lot of change. I went on maternity leave. When I came back, it's like a whole new ball game. You're like, oh wait, I have this fresh perspective of what I want to do and where I want to be. And again, was like, I don't need to be in a mission driven org to love what I'm doing. I was ready for a change. I had been there for 5 years. And I actually stepped a little bit backwards because I had been overseeing multiple functions. The onboarding team and implementation team at the company was responsible for onboarding, technical implementation, and customer education. It was all of the functions in one role. And so when I came over to ZoomInfo, it was just onboarding. I was like, oh, just the like I don't have to do education. I don't have to think about that. I don't have to think about the technical implementation. Which I think again re-centered me and refocused me into getting that part of the org really where we wanted it to be and growing it. At that point, it had been a fairly new organization and it really needed to mature and create a differentiated engagement model, different experiences for different types of customers, personalizing it a little bit more. And instead of having to look at everything, I was kind of really able to zoom in and focus on that part of the org, which I was a little nervous about taking that step back, but I think it actually projected me. Like, I started with one function at ZoomInfo and we're up to like 6 or 7 because I took that step back. So it's really been interesting to do that. I'll be honest, understand that this is a very privileged statement to be able to say, but I've never planned for the next step in my career. It's always been, and I've always been ready for that, right? When I talk about career progression at ZoomInfo or anywhere really, there has to be business need and individual readiness. And you can't always create the business need. Certainly you can sometimes, but you can't always create that, but you can be ready for an opportunity when it comes to you. And I'm proud of the fact that I have been ready for those opportunities and those have come. And when the business need is there, I'm ready for it and ready to step into it. I think that's a lot of the progression at ZoomInfo specifically of being able to take on these different functions. And the other piece of it is that you can't oversee all these different functions if the foundation isn't there and if the rest of the leadership isn't there. I trust my leadership team implicitly, and I know that they trust their leadership team implicitly, right? And I don't have to worry about that. I can lead and I can probably poke my head in a couple too many times for the team. But I trust what they're doing. We all have a shared vision of where we want to go and what we want to do. We're passionate about the customer. And so having the right people in the right roles is the other part of I think the career progression and expansion within the scope that I've seen. These teams also just work really well together. You need all of them for a great customer experience.
I couldn't possibly agree more with that. And I know that's something that we'll get really deep into. One thing that really stood out in what you just shared with me is this idea of I guess readiness, but from the lens of there's a bit of going with the flow, right? And I think so many people, particularly if you've already hit a certain career milestone where you're in a leadership role, you might be overseeing some sort of function, a small function, you're a manager, you've moved into some sort of manager role, maybe a director level role. And naturally you want to try to progress into the next kind of stage of the career ladder, but it's not always linear is what I've at least found. And it sounds like you've been also open to that as well. It's it doesn't necessarily need to be linear. You can see patterns and start to recognize opportunities across the business where, hey, it might make sense for us to collapse these two functions into one because there's some sort of correlation or there's a pattern between these two things where if we combine them together, we can maximize our impact. We can grow and scale not only the people that are within those teams, but grow our impact on the business. It sounds like you've been able to really capitalize on that, which I love.
Yeah, there's definitely a piece of when I say it's been the business need, I haven't necessarily gone out and pitched bringing these groups together.
Right.
But certainly I've had water cooler talk. Wouldn't it be really cool if this happened? Imagine the impact we could have, right? Planting the seed and then being the name that the decision maker who makes that decision, being the name in the closed door room that someone says, they're oh, who could do that? Mary could do that. She's ready for that. Let's go. That's some of the way you can create the business need. And to your point, I actually think I heard on another podcast, or maybe it was something I was reading, listening for the very specific words that people are using, that your leaders are using, whether it's in your quarterly earnings calls or things like that, listening for those terms, infusing that into your dialogue, infusing it into the vision that you're creating for your team and for your own personal brand, I think can be really powerful, a really powerful way to show readiness as well and kind of help if you want to create that business need, create that business need too.
100%. This is such juicy career advice for our listeners. So good.
I don't know if this is the way we were going with this one, but the topic, but I love that these are all the things I think about. They're not black and white. They're not written down. Sometimes they completely go in opposite direction, but it really depends on the business, where you are, your career, who you're working with, and all that stuff.
I think being able to read the business is such an underrated skill, especially in CX, because so often we get stuck in like the ways of working, right? If you're in customer education, you naturally are interested in, learning design, learning theory, and you want to maximize the impact that you're having on the learner through the experience that you're providing, but you're not necessarily attuned to those larger business goals. Same goes for like any of the other functions under the umbrella of CX. And I find that more often than not, when I speak to leaders who are looking for coaching or whatever, the misstep is not that, again, it goes to the linear thing. You're so focused on figuring out how to maximize your impact within your lane that you're not actually paying attention to the broader business objectives and listening to your executives and their goals and what they're trying to do with the business, because there's often so many small opportunities to expand your scope and sort of like connect some dots that maybe they're not even seeing through the work that you do. And that's real influence to me, right? I was on a podcast recently where I talked about this. The idea of needing to prove your value, prove your worth. We need to, earn a seat at the table. We need to prove the value of customer education and digital CX in these programs that we're running. And it's like, no, just learn to speak the language of the business. Talk and speak in ways that your business executives care about, and they will naturally listen to you and think about you when they go to make decisions about reorganization or restructuring teams and that sort of thing. So it's such a good thing to talk about. I think more people should be having this conversation in our space.
Yeah. And it's such a hard skill to fully capture. It's about practice. It's about being mindful of trying to do this and remembering and really working across the business too, right? Like you need to be an SME. That is 100% true. You need to know how to talk about your business, about customer education, but being an SME is about being an SME around your whole business as well,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
our CEO, Henry, talks like, you're a ZoomInfo teammate first. Like, yes, you need to run your business and you need to advocate for your team, but you need to advocate for ZoomInfo. What's for ZoomInfo as a business? Because if there's not a business, there's not a team. So like you need to know the whole scale as well.
Totally. So, okay, so your team has now grown and scaled. You went from overseeing onboarding to now overseeing all of these 7 different functions. Sounded like it happened sort of naturally. There was a need for the business to sort of collapse some of these functions. Why did you choose, or ZoomInfo choose, to unify these different functions? And what does that structure unlock, or what did that structure unlock in terms of benefit to the organization?
Yeah, when I came in, we had kind of a VP overseeing onboarding, education. And then like I was onboarding and adoption, and we collapsed that function because there were just a lot of people touching the customer in the first like 60 days. And so we collapsed onboarding and adoption, and we said onboarding is responsible for adoption. You don't need a separate role for that. And then we elongated the onboarding period to 90 days. So it's not 30, it's not 60, it's 90.
Okay.
Will say that like the 2026 vision is less time bound and more use case ROI driven, right? Like what's your first use case? I mean, I care how long it takes to get there. And certainly we have an SLA to drive urgency, but it's not like you only have us for 90 days. Like, let's get value.
Yep.
There's that. A little bit of a pivot there, but I love it. And then the education side was there. I think, like, to your point, naturally there were some changes in the structure. And so bringing the technical implementation side into that, it had originally lived with support, because those 3 functions are always included in the first 90 days, bringing those together, making sure we're streamlining some of those processes, making the handoff a little bit more smooth, making it feel more like one team, I think, really smoothed out some of those handoff pieces. The leaders all worked really closely together. They meet multiple times a week to talk about their strategy together. It's not an onboarding, implementation, and education strategy, right? It's sharing all of those pieces. I think it's just like a mindset unlock in some ways. We actually built out the operations side of it. One of the things I found as we were all growing and working together is when we needed something from our RevOps team or our go-to-market technologies team to build our systems, we were almost competing for the hours. And so by centralizing the ops function, that team was responsible for prioritizing all of the asks from our business before it even went to the RevOps or the technologies team. And that took the prioritization and made us prioritize together. And then it also took like that side desk work off of my directors or my team leads plates, right? We made it a point to say, is it that a team lead is supposed to do at our business? They are supposed to coach and be boots on the ground for the ICs and really up level the ICs. What do managers do? Managers are certainly driving accountability across their team leads, but they have some smaller projects that drive innovation. And then directors really driving that larger strategy, right? And so you kind of have an inverted triangle for the level of strategic work that they're doing. But you can't do the strategic work if you're also doing all of the requirements writing and things like that. And so it took some of that off of their plate. Like that was the goal of that operations team. And to think across all of these lines of business or departments to drive a unified execution. And so having even that operations team unlocked ability to be strategic, really focus on accountability, and then coaching the individuals to make a great customer experience.
This is so interesting to me because one of the things that I think I shared with you when we had our pre-call, that I was fortunate enough to lead a team where I brought together all of the digital CX functions directly alongside product marketing and partner marketing and a few other functions that I felt were really crucial for us to be able to deliver an optimized customer experience. But one of the first things that we did was do a customer journey mapping exercise and service design blueprinting. And what I'm hearing from what you're sharing is that, like, when you think about optimizing the digital customer experience for your customers and delivering customer outcomes, it's equally important to look at the design of your team and your service design in the background to make sure that it's conducive to delivering the experience that you desire. And what I've found more often than not now doing this work with clients is the friction often lies on the inside of the company. It's like the handoffs are messy. There's 3,000 people that are touching the customer in the first 90 days. There's all of this stuff happening that's actually causing a lot of friction and preventing us from being able to deliver an orchestrated and optimized experience. Is that what you found as well? And did you find that once you unified these teams, there was a massive unlock in terms of your ability to deliver outcomes for the customers?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the right people in the right roles doing the work that you designed for them. To your point, if it's not unified, if you don't understand what your role is, and who doesn't love a good racy, but if you don't understand those pieces, and it's with great intentions, right? Everybody wants to create a great customer experience. But if you're not doing your role and we don't understand what those are, it actually becomes chaos. And so unifying these teams, it wasn't about a control thing, like I get to decide what we're doing. It's having one vision and then being able to orchestrate that internally so that it feels very orchestrated and streamlined externally. And driving that vision, driving that mission, making sure that our goals are aligned, because I'm sure you've seen it or been in organizations where we all care about the customer outcome, but our goals do sometimes misalign, right? They do. Renewal goals and upsell goals can misalign to what a great customer experience looks like. And again, it's all with good intentions for the business, but it can cause friction. And I think aligning some of these teams allowed us to move a little bit more quickly and be more agile because the goal was very, very aligned across this. It is the customer experience.
Sure.
We influence revenue for sure. And, we're looking to monetize our services and drive some of that revenue. But the customer experience is super at the forefront of what we're doing and the decisions that we make. And when we're looking at the data, I'm not necessarily always looking at the revenue data to inform my decision. I'm looking at the experience data, the NPS, the CSAT, all of those pieces to make sure that we're driving that experience forward. And then the revenue piece of it comes from my colleagues, and we can kind of pull that in to help inform our decisions as well. Might structure the team or what decisions we need to make to scale or to capacity plan. No problem.
One of the things that I have found really challenging over the course of my career in digital CX, particularly in very, very quick or like fast growing organizations is this shipping the org chart. And I think you nailed it when you expressed that like caring about the customer often is, it's not enough. Like we can say we're customer obsessed, we can say we're focused on delivering customer outcomes, but if we don't understand the fundamental challenges of the business and we don't directly tie our outputs to outcomes for the customer, and oftentimes that comes down to bringing the teams together, just because I found that when the teams are siloed, you end up in this situation where everyone's just trying to do right by the customer. We all want to try and help. We want to try to be valuable. All these teams have their blinders on and they're like, I'm doing this thing that I know is going to have a positive impact on the customer experience, but you're not thinking about the 3,000 other things that are going on across the business that's also causing actually more friction for the customer than if you were to be aligned and bring these teams together.
I mean, a great example of that is customer communications. Like there are comms that come out of our university. There are comms that come out of our customer marketing team when we ship features, when we have upsell campaigns, right? We have go-to-market plays team where they're shipping upsells that are based off of signals and triggers. And if we don't have a way to know and throttle that back at the right time, and it's happening in 3 different teams and there's no kind of centralized accountability there, then that experience for the customer is not great. And so to your point, having that really detailed journey map of what are the possibilities here? Are we talking like time-based communications? Are these trigger-based communications? When do we stop that trigger based off of another action or something like that? The more you can centralize those comms teams, I think the better. Like that's just one example of how you can overwhelm the customer if you're not mapping it accordingly, and how like if you brought those teams together, I think that you could create a even more enriched customer experience as well.
This is exactly why I'm such a huge advocate of bringing together product marketing and customer marketing teams under the umbrella of digital CX, because they're often responsible for, if you're responsible for messaging, positioning, go-to-market launches, that needs to carry through and connect into your customer experience, because at the end of the day, it's your CX folks that are going to be responsible for adoption. And so if that line of product launch is disconnected between teams and they're all operating in silos, you're actually missing a huge amount of potential to oversee a really cohesive and effective launch. And I know this is something that you've talked about on your LinkedIn, this idea that, product launches aren't, necessarily go to market. Adoption is the thing that's actually most critical in your product launch. What do you think most SaaS companies get wrong when it comes to this, when it comes to the connection between CX and go-to-market?
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways that you can look at go-to-market. I think the biggest thing is not including CX in the planning of your product go-to-market. Point blank. If you're not thinking of it from a CX perspective, if you haven't created a framework, right? If your PMs are deciding the go-to-market plan, or if you have a go-to-market strategy team that isn't including a customer perspective or POV and what that means, right? Like, are we including it in a package that we already have? Should we charge? Should we grandfather people into this? If we grandfather and give it to everybody, how are we communicating to drive adoption? If you're not thinking about all of these steps and you're just like, great, we shipped it. That's cool. You shipped it. It doesn't mean anybody's using it if they don't know that it's there, or if they don't know the value of it. And then when someone comes back and says, oh, well, no one's using this feature, why are we keeping it up? Why are we, paying the cost on the back end to develop it and maintain it? But no one knew it was there, but it's super valuable. Obviously, you built it for a reason. There's a misstep there. I think not digging into your customer base to look at, you just built a feature. How do you sell that to your customer base, right? How do you pull in all the signals that are coming from your actual customers, right? There's a gold mine of data. If you're recording any of your information, like obviously ZoomInfo has Chorus. If you're not pulling that Chorus data in and your conversation intelligence and using that as a signal to know that they're ready for something else or they're not ready. They just might not be ready. If you're not combining the conversation and you're not pulling in their product usage or lack of usage, if you're not pulling in the sentiment from conversations, maybe they talk to someone on the product team, but you're not pulling that information and you're just looking at the sales calls, you're missing a gold mine of information to cross-sell, upsell into that customer base.
This is where I think most CX teams end up missing the mark too, is because they're so focused. I think over the last few years, I've seen, particularly in customer education, there's such a focus on like churn prevention, support ticket deflection, retention. These are all excellent metrics to focus on, but there's actually so much potential in driving net new expansion revenue from your existing accounts. And this is where the magic of a really strong CX team actually lives, is in expansion of revenue. And by connecting the dots across these things and making sure that your CX team is directly embedded within your product launches, your product team, your marketing team, your go-to-market motion, you unlock such a massive amount of potential when it comes to driving that revenue and keeping customer acquisition costs really low. Because the reality is that like it's way cheaper to keep the customer and expand that account, land and expand, than it is to go after net new business. And I think this is something that's often missed within CX teams. Has that been your experience as well, chatting with other people across the industry?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like going back to what you're talking about, like talking the talk of other leaders so that they care about it. We try to find ways to do that at ZoomInfo. Our director of customer education, does a really great job connecting live trainings that are done within like 60 to 90 days of renewal. And if that renewal was at risk and then we did a training, how many of those actually went up in likelihood or actually renewed, right? How much did it go up? If you had a training before that and you know that they had a proposal, how much more quickly did that, get signed, things like that. And I think a big miss on CX teams, to your point, is not sharing that information with the internal audiences that then make people go, does Mary have a good insight on our customers? Or, hey, do we have a play here of like, let's just deploy customer education and that's actually going to help our renewals and be a save. And like, it's not even just to your point about the churn or the save plays there, but it drives upsell revenue as well. We've done analyses around if someone has a training within this amount of time, how much do those renewals increase, right? All of those pieces, talking the language of your counterparts, I think can be really important. And I think to your point, it is a miss of not being able to communicate in that way.
I'm starting to see a lot more emphasis on the revenue piece now that CX teams are falling under the umbrella in most organizations under a CRO, because there is that sort of pre and post sale. None of that matters. Whether it's pre-sale, post-sale, none of it matters. Our job under the umbrella of go-to-market is to drive revenue for the company, no matter whether that's pre-sale and post-sale. And that's why I think it's so important to pull together CX teams that are responsible for the entire end-to-end customer journey. From the moment that a customer learns about the brand to the moment that they're a champion or advocate, everything should be under the umbrella. At least when it comes to delivering and orchestrating that digital customer experience, it should all fall under the same team. And it sounds like that's the way that you've organized your team structure now.
Yeah, for a good amount of it. I mean, I haven't, despite my best efforts, I haven't quite gotten all of it here. And my boss makes fun of me sometimes. She's like, you want another? I was like, I don't want it for me. I want it for the business. I want to be able to orchestrate that end to end. And I think it's helpful. I do think that it is important to be able to work cross-functionally across the business, right? And so if it doesn't live in your wheelhouse, being able to still make that connection and still work really well cross-functionally. Do I believe that you can do it faster and be a little bit more agile if it's under one team? 100%. Is it possible to do it when it lives in different spaces? Yes. But then I think that's where your leader's ability to build the relationship, to build the communication pathways, how you structure your cadence of meeting across the business, and really leaning into kind of like, I like to put my customer success hat back on and be like, hey, like, what's your use case? What do you do? And what are your goals? How can I support that for you? Right. That's helped me in working cross-functionally, I think. Really leaning in and caring about what they're doing, and then how I can support that has allowed for those functions that maybe don't fall in, that could be easier if it did, to really just continue to project ZoomInfo and our digital experience forward.
I want to dive into the onboarding transformation that you guys did, because I read the case study and I was just like, holy cow, this is so impressive. But I want to... you guys won an award, if I'm not mistaken, right? For your onboarding
for
transformation.
for growth customer growth awards.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So, but I want to backtrack before that moment. There's inevitably some moment where you realized that ZoomInfo's onboarding model needed some sort of overhaul. Can you talk me through what that moment was and then what transformation you guys went through?
Yeah, it was really at the beginning of when I started at ZoomInfo, to be honest. As I said, I came in as the director of onboarding and adoption. And my supervisor at the time had created the organization, I think 9 months before I came in. And it was kind of a one size fits all model. As a new organization would be. I will say also that at that time, ZoomInfo had acquired companies and they all need to be onboarded. And so, of course, if you have an onboarding team, you use the onboarding team. And so volume spiked really quickly, really high. And so they realized that they needed a leader there, went out, I applied and came in. And the leader that I worked with, really great at operationalizing things, really good at driving scale, but had other teams as well. And so my job really was, well, one, we had bought a technology that they wanted to kind of put our project management system into. And so my job, because I had implemented that somewhere else, was to make sure we can build that, but like streamline the milestones. What are the steps to get onboarded so that everybody gets the same experience? Hypothetically, theoretically, that sounds great because everybody should have a similar experience, but it shouldn't be the same experience. And so when I came in, as anyone coming into a new organization would, you do your SWOT analysis and you're like, all right, what's going on here? How are we doing? And obviously the org had known that it was time to kind of change things. And so I got to come in and like, as a new leader, be like, here's my proposal of what we need to do and change, strictly because of the volume. Currently are at we start 1,500 new projects a month, and those run for 90 days. And so you're up until 4,000, 5,000 sometimes running projects. We also currently do our proofs of concept because you're pretty much so onboarding people early at that point. Like we're getting them set up, making the connections, showing value. And so our team handles that. And so when you're running that, it doesn't really matter how many people you have. It's a lot. It's a heavy lift. It's a lot of effort and you do need to streamline it. But when you have that volume and you're kind of saying, hey, let's get everybody kicked off with a person, you end up with people who are in back-to-back 8 hours of kickoff calls, and it doesn't let you follow up with people. It doesn't let you check in. It doesn't let you customize the experience. And so if you're not getting more people, you have to come up with another way to figure that out. And so we kind of said, great, not everybody actually even needs the same experience. If you think about an enterprise business and then you think of a small business owner, right? Like they are the VP of sales, they are the SDR, they are the marketing person. That small business doesn't have 5-10 hours. They don't even have 1 hour in their day sometimes to sit with someone to do a training or to do a kickoff and think about what their strategy is. They need to get in there really quickly. And so we really just took a look at the best way we could segmenting our customers. And it's a little bit more complex, but we look at their actual segment of their business. We look at the products that they purchase. We do have kind of like a go-to-market maturity score, like how mature is your go-to-market? If you're a new business and you've never actually done inbound or outbound go-to-market, that's a totally different experience than if you have this very complex routing, SDR, self-sourcing AE kind of experience. And so we didn't get to that right away. Quite honestly, it was SMB, mid-market, enterprise. And so we segmented those. And then we just said, okay, what's the experience that they get? Where can we pull back? And at the SMB level, everyone gets a kickoff, a technical implementation, a training, an OMR, which is like our check-in, and then we look at their product adoption and then we hand them off. So six milestones, everybody gets them. The format in which those are delivered differs by model, at least when we started, right? So your kickoff was always live technical implementation. In SMB might have been a webinar, and it could be live, so you can interact with somebody. or it could be a recording if that's what you want. Same thing with the training. And then we would do an email check-in, OMR, and then a live adoption review, and then an email handoff, right? Down market, you have less time to spend with us. We have less time to spend with you. It's more digital. And then it kind of you get closer to the front of the experience, that's more live and more personal. And as you tail off, that's the model that we went with. We kept that model for a decent amount of time because you need to have a good end size to understand what's working and what's not. And so we tried really, really hard not to continually change our segmentation, because you're going to have to keep that in mind when you go back and say, well, what worked and what didn't work? Well, if you're looking at it and saying they all got the same experience, but they actually didn't, you're not making great informed decisions. And so we tried to keep that like really similar for quite a bit of time. And then we looked back. At one point, we had this low touch model where you would do a kickoff call and everything else was more of a digital experience. And we realized the people that got a full digital versus that one kickoff call and like got to meet somebody, the adoption wasn't any different. The satisfaction, the NPS, like it wasn't any different. They actually don't need to feel like they've met somebody, that they would be fine in this digital experience. And so we were able to change that. And then we could take the people that were doing that kickoff call and up level them in their career and in their skill set. And they could go into that mid touch. And some of those, we started playing around with how many customers we can get into each of these models, if you will. And so it's continuous. Like we are not done. I mentioned at the beginning of this, like we're talking about use case versus time bound, really trying to get into that consultative mind frame. And it's not check the box milestones. It's what are we trying to do here? And then what are the steps we need? I believe in this is both in how I work with people and the culture we create, but also the framework, like structured autonomy. You should have a structure to know exactly what your role is and what gates you have to kind of hit at for milestones or exit criteria, whatever that is. But your job as a professional is to have the autonomy to go in and out of that structure when a customer needs it versus when you need it. If you're like, oh, we're going too far over here, we don't actually know if we're making progress, pull them back into that structure. Use that structure as a way to drive urgency, make progress. But like, that autonomy is the fun part of these customer facing jobs, right? That's the creativity you get to infuse into it. But you always have the safety of the structure. You always know what the expectation is of what you have to hit. And I think that makes it fun.
I'm curious if moving to a slightly more digital motion, particularly for the smaller segments or, less complex segments, I suppose, compared to enterprise, gave you access and visibility to data and signals that actually were beneficial for your team members. When you talk about that flex and that ability to kind of like move into other opportunities and sort of flex to meet the customer where they are, at least I've found that those signals and that data has been a huge unlock for the teams. Did you find that shifting to digital did that for your team?
Yeah, we just purchased Ever After, and it's
Nice.
a kind of a digital engagement platform. And so our digital customers use that platform, and before they get started, we're like, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What are your goals? And like in their own words, and some of it's dropped down so we can standardize, but they're filling this information out. And certainly on our side, after the kickoff call, we have a system where we, pull in the chorus call, and we can kind of say like, what are the inputs, the outputs, what are they trying to do? And it can guide us, but it is hearing it in their own words, getting that data, seeing how quickly they go. Like our digital customers have gone through the steps so much faster. And I always say digital is not a dirty word. Like I say that to our sales team all the time. I was like, it's not bad. Everybody loves shopping on Amazon at 3 a.m. Like you don't need to wait for someone to walk you through the store and help you pick out your selection. You can do it in your pajamas. And and it's a great experience because what you need is right there, right? The support that you need, it's easy to use. The buttons are clear of what you're trying to click, right? I can do all my returns and it's very simple. Making it straightforward, getting suggestions on what you should purchase or shouldn't purchase in my case, right? It's all right there. And we need to reframe that a digital experience isn't less than, it is better for some customers. And sure, like if you want me to do something, I probably need a little bit of one-on-one time. That's just my learning style. But like to your point, we were able to capture what's your learning style. Are you like a document person or are you a video person? And what we surface, we just change it. We give a one pager versus give you a video with the same content. That's like scaling. That it's easier to do that in our digital experience right now because we're getting that information. And you do a kickoff and you're like, so Samantha, how do you learn? How would you like me to give you your resources, right? Like it's a little weird, but like you're asking it and filling it out and collecting that data point. And sometimes you can figure it out just by what they choose to engage with, right? Like if you have both of the options and they're just you don't even have to ask. If they're clicking on the Word document all the time, that tells me what I need to know. That's what you prefer. That's what I'm going to start popping up for you in later kind of educational experiences.
That's exactly where I think the most potential lies in digital. And again, I couldn't agree more with the statement that there's sort of this misconception that digital is less than. In fact, in my opinion, it's way more powerful of emotion because you access data that allows you to then further personalize their experience. And who doesn't want an experience that feels completely personal to them, very contextual to where they're at with the product, the problems that they're having? We have access to all of this data. Like in SaaS, there's no excuse anymore these days, I feel like, for teams, right?
You can watch their like click patterns. Yeah. And then like when they're spending a lot of time and you're like, oh, you're spending too much time here, you need a resource for that.
Exactly.
Right? Or like the person that only logs in on a Tuesday or logs in on the first Tuesday of the month. I think like when we think about adoption and utilization, we look for weekly utilization and that says that it's good utilization. But if for 4 months, this person's only logging in on the first Tuesday of the month, if that pattern continues, that's good usage. We shouldn't be trying, like, sure, you can push a little bit more utilization, but they could be very happy with the utilization that they have. And if you go too far and push too much utilization, you actually turn them off because they're getting too many emails, they're over communicated. Like you have to find that happy balance, but those patterns really tell you how to personalize.
And give you the ability to scale, I think, in a way that wouldn't be possible because again, like, yes, we have access to, listening tools, intelligence tools. AI is making all of this a heck of a lot easier these days. But without correlating that to actual action in the platform, product usage, telemetry, like understanding also outside of the product, right? Like your user is interacting with your brand across a multitude of channels. It's your responsibility to listen and pay attention to how that user is accessing information across all those different channels and then figure out across, once you start to correlate that data and you really get a full sense of how that person is navigating the brand in its totality, that's what unlocks your ability to do digital at scale and to optimize and orchestrate and personalize the experience for that particular person. And in my opinion, that's a way better experience than yes, I might have a really beautiful high touch experience with a CSM or with an onboarding specialist or whatever. And that's nice and lovely, but it takes time and they won't necessarily get to know me and my needs as quickly as data and listening and intelligence and insights can. There's no comparison.
Yeah. And I think sometimes like, even though you can ask the question, people don't know what they don't know what they don't know. And like, if you just watch their patterns, they're not speaking it to you. It's like, well, I really like to do it this way. And I like this and I like that. Like, just watch what they're doing. And like intuitively, they're doing something and giving you information. So it's really, really cool to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, I want to wrap this up because I'm cognizant of time, but I want to kind of end things on a futuristic note. Based on what we just talked about, there's obviously a lot of potential to unlock here in the digital CX realm. So how do you see CX evolving over the next few years, especially with AI and agentic systems coming into play? What's your take?
Yeah, super interesting. I think you said this earlier, right? Like when you think about CX in the future, like everyone is thinking about AI and how can we make ourselves more efficient. But I think if we listen to the data and we use the AI to help us orchestrate and personalize, that is going to, skyrocket. And to your point, who are the people that we need to lean into? And it might be our smaller, less mature customers that need our help a little bit more, but it's not everybody. And so looking at the data and the patterns, I think is going to be something that we continue to focus on. And I do think that people will realize that digital's not bad. It isn't less than. And I think you have to kind of think that way. I don't think there's any other way to really scale. It is not even really scaling, but like to give a good experience, right? We want these micro learnings. We want to be able to do it via email. The last time someone called me to have a conversation, I was like, this could have been an email. It could have been a different type of experience. And we just have to listen and start delivering our experiences in that way. And the only way we're going to know is through data and delivering in a digital way. People wanted to be able to do more with less.
Yep.
Less time, right? They want to be able to do more things and be able to see success. And so we just need to be able to be attuned to that.
Yeah. So we're in a completely different era of SaaS, right? So it's very important that we just go with the flow and go with this transition at this moment in time, I think.
For sure.
What's one piece of advice that you'd give to CX leaders who are trying to modernize their post-sale experience?
Yeah, it's kind of the same way I think about how we onboard people. Don't try to boil the ocean and do everything at once. I'll be at ZoomInfo 4 years in February, and we have evolved so much. And there is so much more we can do. But if you start saying, we have to do this and we have to do this, you're going to get to that cognitive overload place and you're going to get paralyzed and not make any progress, right? It's progress over perfection every single day. And take it bite by. You can have a great vision and say, this is where we want to go. But from what I know, from what I've seen, I mean, certainly it can depend on how big your organization is. Like we have 250 people on my team, 400 within our whole CX org. So that's a pretty big change management that we have to do there. But like, you're not doing a full perfect digital motion in 1 year. And even if you are, you're going to have to iterate on that because we're moving quick. So take it in small bites. Don't try to boil the ocean and don't put yourself in a place where you just don't make progress, because that's really important to make progress.
Amazing. It's kind of the same. To your point, it's the same thing we'd use in the customer experience, right? What's the next best action that we want them to take? We design for that next best action that we know is going to lead to the result that we want to see. It's kind of the same thing with your team design, just like one thing at a time. Focus on
little bits. Pick a use case and solve for that use case, adopt it, and then go pick the next use case.
Love it. Mary, thank you so much for spending this hour with me. I think that our listeners will see so much value in everything that you just shared and like be inspired truly by your journey, scaling your own career from, focusing on one specific function in one area to now overseeing so many different things, so many different parts of that total customer lifecycle. It's truly inspiring to see other people out there doing kind of the same thing that I've been seeing and sort of trying to usher in this industry for a few years. So love it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving me a platform to share. I love sharing. I do executive coaching on the side. And so
Amazing.
Just having a conversation with people, like that's why I do that. I want to help people get better and take that next step. And so I love having, the platform to be able to do that and just sharing some of the insights. Because clearly I'm passionate about it.
So many insights, and the passion is very evident. Where can people find you if they're interested in executive coaching with you?
I'm on LinkedIn.
All right.
So people can certainly, that's where I try to share a post here or there. But I also just always love having conversations about CX in general. So hit me up on LinkedIn. If you have ZoomInfo, you can find my email and my phone number in there. If you don't have ZoomInfo, you should get it. Let me know if you need any help with that.
Perfect ending. I put a cherry on that.
I'm gonna plug it there.